Welcome to Wyoming's Health Watch. I'm attorney Jason Oakes, and here you'll learn the most up-to-date information about dangerous drugs, dangerous products, and safety news with hopes that it just might prevent a catastrophe. Let's get started.
Good evening. This is Jason Oakes. I want to thank one of our listeners for bringing this to my attention. This is a fascinating piece that comes out of Utah, and Utah has seen an enormous problem with vaping, and vaping all the way from beginning in middle school and certainly up through the high schools. And I want to give credit to Mike Headrick, who works for the news station KSL in Utah. He did a wonderful piece, investigative piece on vaping, specifically the legal issues and the legal loopholes that he's identified that a lot of vape stores are trying to get around in Utah. But I thought he discovered some information that I felt was very important to get out and distribute to as many people as possible. So I want to talk about this for a little bit. For those who aren't familiar with Utah, there is some laws in place that prevent vaping to be sold in specialty stores, and specialty stores can't be within 1,000 feet of any schools. So in addition, you can't even enter a specialty store in Utah unless you are 19 or older. So there is this one layer of protection that they seemingly believe may provide some protections from students regarding vaping, but the problem is they've seen an enormous increase in this addiction among middle schoolers and high schoolers. So obviously Mike Headrick had set out to figure out what was going on and why these 1,000-foot school zone rules were not assisting in the ability to curb this epidemic. And what he found, interestingly, was that a lot of stores can get around this loophole if they are a mixed retail store. So a type of store that doesn't just sell tobacco and vaping and older products, but a retail store that sells Coke and candy and candy bars and that sort of stuff seem to be able to get around this loophole. So Mike went into these various stores, all of which were well within the 1,000 feet that they should not have been within. And he did a little bit of a test, and this is where it gets really interesting, I think, and something that I'm not sure is unique because of the 1,000 feet perimeter that's required in Utah, or something that we might see here in Wyoming or in a different state. So I'm going to check it out, but this is what he discovered. So he went into a variety of these retail shops and purchased a couple things like Cokes and a candy bar and a vape pod. But what was very interesting is that when he looked at the receipts at these various mixed retail stores, none of the receipts recorded the fact that he had bought a vape pod. For example, on one receipt it said gift item and then the price. Another receipt said custom item and then the price of the vape pod. Another receipt said miscellaneous and then the price of the vape pod. And another receipt said glass and the price of the vape pod. And this he felt was very strange. In fact, in one retail store that he bought a vape pod in, the receipt actually said rubber band, and it said $14. And next to it was a juice he purchased that said $6. He could not get any straight answers from the retail clerks why the receipts were not recording that which he was purchasing. The best he got was, it's just the system. But he felt this was of note and something that may be intentionally being done to try to get around this loophole in Utah. The point being, and I think something to think about and reflect on, is that maybe the big bad companies as Juul and those, Blue's another one that have been made out to be, and I certainly believe they hold a significant responsibility for what has occurred and the epidemic we've seen amongst our youth on the vaping crisis. But I think one thing we can't lose sight of is that these retail stores may be contributing just as much, or at least in part. And certainly in Utah, this raises a serious question. So for those of you who do not live in Utah, and frankly for those of you who do, just because you see a receipt from a gas station of your child's, look at it carefully. Because if it says rubber band and it's $14 next to it, you and I know that that was not a rubber band that was purchased. If you see something that says miscellaneous, I don't think I've ever seen a receipt where it said miscellaneous. That's suspicious. Or something like a custom gift. I mean, at a retail store, at a mixed retail store, which is basically a gas station or a convenience store, these are red flags to take a look for. If you happen to be digging through your kid's pants because you're throwing them in the wash or anything similar. We're going to continue to provide information on how various companies are trying to get around these restrictions are going into place. And we think our podcast today is particularly of noteworthy because much to our disappointment, when it was looking like earlier this week and certainly late last week, it was looking very good that the Trump administration was going to initiate a full ban on all flavored vape products. And as of this morning, as reported by the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, the Trump administration had backed off initiating that ban. So it's going to take private sector, in my humble opinion, to deal with this issue. It's going to take lawsuits to curb this epidemic. And that's another example, unfortunately, where I don't think we can rely on our politicians to make these issues go away. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to see more information or see some more podcasts that we do a number of them. Please go to WyomingHealthWatch.com, or you can just search Wyoming Health Watch on Spotify or Apple iTunes. Thanks again for listening. I'm Jason Oakes. Have a great evening.